Now welcome to another lightning response video where we're going to be doing some more Skeleton Crew questions, and be warned, there will be spoilers for the finale in this video, so if you haven't seen it, you don't want that ruined, you probably don't want to watch this video yet. But anyway, the first question comes to us from Strike Flyer, who asked, "Hey Thor, I know people want a season 2 of Skeleton Crew, but my question is, how would you even do that? As cool as it would be to see from how the show is playing out, I think it'll just be a one and done thing. I can't really see the show continuing past a single season. Don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed the show, but sometimes maybe a one and done story can really be better than multiple seasons dragging it out." And yeah, I kind of agree that it doesn't need a second season. Now, I'm not saying I would be upset if tomorrow or a week from now or at Celebration in a few months, if it got announced that a second season was being made. I'm not saying I'd be upset, but I don't really think it needs it. I think it was a pretty clear-cut, one-and-done type story. There are certainly some questions left unanswered that I would really enjoy getting the answer to, but I don't really know if they pertain to the actual story of the characters, if that makes sense. It's more questions about what happens to At-Aten, what happens to Jod, what happened to the supervisor exactly. I mean, we see him destroyed, but does that mean the planet will not do the great work anymore? Or just what happens to all of that? It's not really about what happens to the kids next, necessarily. Even though, yeah, I think there are some questions about what could happen to them, and we'll get to one in just a moment. But anyway, I don't think everything always needs a sequel because it's successful. Not that, according to the numbers that we have, Skeleton Crew hasn't exactly been a success. But you know what I'm saying. It is something that a lot of people have enjoyed that have watched it. And just because it was really good doesn't necessarily mean you need to get more. We could just get another new show, another fresh and interesting show, another kind of different take on Star Wars, instead of just doing another season of this. And for the record, Watts and Ford, the showrunners, have talked about doing more. They have ideas, and they would take into account that the kids are growing up or would look older in another season than they do in this one. They wouldn't try to make it like a direct continuation, kind of like Stranger Things has done, where we now have 20-something-year-olds, even a 30-year-old playing teenagers in high school. But anyway, I love the show. I would not be upset to get more, but I don't think we need more. All right, moving on now, we have a question from Hussein Sultan Zada, who asked, "Hey Thor, I think they'll one day make a sequel era show and have these kids in it as adults. That way the audience will have some familiar characters in it that they like, and so it makes them more likely to watch and enjoy the show. Either that or the kids might have a role in the sequel era movies they have planned. What do you think of this?" And apparently, allegedly, the Rogue Squadron movie that we were supposed to get like a year and a half ago, it was supposed to be done and out by now, the one from Patty Jenkins, apparently it isn't a dead project from what we've heard, that it is still going to happen someday, somehow, eventually. And when you consider that is supposed to be a movie about X-Wing pilots or fighter pilots, kinda, you could look at the ending of this show at the end of Skeleton Crew here at Wim looking up at the X-Wings and clearly hinting at the fact he wants to become an X-Wing pilot, and wonder if there will be a connection. Could we see Wim in a Rogue Squadron movie someday? Because we also have heard it is supposed to be sequel trilogy era, and so they could change or adapt whatever they had planned to include Wim as one of the pilots, and I don't think it's going to take much changing. This little adventure could be referenced at some point, but it's not like it needs to be, or you would need to have seen Skeleton Crew to understand his character 20, 25 years in the future, whatever it might be. In other words, yeah, I think there is a chance we see Wim, maybe some of the other kids elsewhere. I think there is a good chance we see Jod somewhere else. He was such an intriguing character that it would be kind of a shame to leave this cliffhanger, though at the same time, do we need every story always finished? Does every character in every show that we have ever seen always need a beginning, middle, and end? Can sometimes characters just serve the purpose in the show and we can move on and let our imagination fill in what ultimately happened to Jod? Which again, doesn't mean I don't want to see his story continue. It's just that, do we need it? Do we always need characters to have a continuation? Or can we just kind of have more fresh characters, more new characters, instead of always bringing back the old? Okay, moving on now, our next question comes to us from Brian Fraser, who asked, "Hey Thor, I think there is one more factor tie-in we didn't account for. This is the proper timeline. What do you think the chances are that Thrawn will discover At-Aten and use it to purchase a fleet?" And I wouldn't say that's impossible. I don't know that it's likely, though you could argue it makes sense that Thrawn hears about old Republic vault that is essentially currently unguarded. The Republic itself is just learning about it and launches an attack against it, I suppose. There was also the theory out there that the Sith had secretly been hiding or hid the planets, the jewels of the old Republic initially, and they were using all those credits to fund the First Order and the Final Order and all of that from the sequels, which, even though a lot of people don't necessarily want this to connect to the sequels in any way, shape, or form, or anything to connect to them, I do have to admit that would have made some sense. It wouldn't have been the most terrible explanation for how you afford building a fleet in the middle of nowhere on Exegol. But either way, I don't think we're going to see that connection with Thrawn and Ad-Aton or the Jewels of the Old Republic. I think he has another plan already in motion with the Night Sisters and probably the remnants that do exist right now. I think they have a pretty significant fleet out there yet that the New Republic doesn't know about. We've had Carson Teva really trying to bring attention that something is going on out there. He seems to be like the only one that believes the Imperial Remnant is actually a threat, and I think he's right. I think they have some super Star Destroyers, a lot of Star Destroyers. I think they got a lot going on out there, and they don't necessarily need the funds. They just need Thrawn to lead them. Okay, now we move on to this question from AmiH8, who asked, Hey Thor, what does the failure of Skeleton Crew mean for the future of Disney Plus Star Wars shows? In this, I mean, will we see less original standalone shows? That's a hard question because, on one hand, Skeleton Crew was enjoyed, again, by the fans who did watch it, which isn't a significant number. And so, in that respect, it is a success. I know a lot of the critics have enjoyed it, yet on the other hand, nobody watched it. So I don't know if they'll look at that and say, we just need something that is more appealing, that is a more self-contained, original, standalone story, or if we should just keep falling back on the Kenobis and the Anakins and the well-known characters that will get an audience pretty much no matter what. I don't know what Disney takes away. They tend to, as far as we can tell, they tend to take away the wrong lessons from these projects and their failures or their successes, so we'll have to wait and see. But I'm going to assume they're just mainly going to look at the numbers. They're going to look at it and see people didn't watch this, and so we're not going to really do much like Skeleton Crew going forward. All right, and final question here, and it is a non-Skeleton Crew question, but it comes to us from the Exile, who asked, Hey Thor, reading has been helping me get through some recent health problems, and I've started getting into the EU. Other people have asked similar questions, but I'm already a ways in and with Master and Apprentice and Catalyst next up. Would be nice to have your thoughts on where to go after this. Love yours and Naboo's content. P.S. For reference, I've read Darth Plagueis, Dark Disciple, Lords of the Sith, A New Dawn, Tarkin, Darth Bane Trilogy, and Dark Lord Trilogy. And I think a lot depends on if you want to go deeper into the EU or if you do want to read some more of the new canon stuff. Because if you want to go EU, I always recommend the Thrawn trilogy, the original Thrawn trilogy, Heir to the Empire, and so on. For me, that was my beginning in the EU, so I always just kind of recommend that because it's not only really good, but it is kind of the starting point of the EU. It's kind of the foundation in a way. Another good read is the X-Wing series, especially if they do end up making a Rogue Squadron movie someday. You can kind of compare and contrast to those two. There's also something like the novelization of Revenge of the Sith. That is a very, very good read. It's one I need to read again because I haven't read it in, like 20 years now. I read it when the movie came out. If you want to stick to the new canon or get deeper into that, there's a book like Phasma, which surprisingly, I know the character kind of sucks in the movies, but that is a really good and kind of different book. There's also the two new Thrawn trilogies, though I'd probably go and read the original Thrawn trilogy and all the original Thrawn stuff first, but you don't have to. But certainly I recommend the two new Thrawn trilogies, and when you get through all that, you can come back and ask for my opinion on where to go next. All right, well, that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below. Tell me what you thought of Skeleton Crew. Where should the show go next, or where should the characters go next, if anywhere? Or you can ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you do, you start your comment off with, Hey Thor, you ask your question. I will try to respond to it in a future video. And there's been a couple non-Skeleton Crew questions that I hope to get to in the coming days or whatever. But either way, leave your questions and comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.